one. Look at that. Yeah. Episode 386 of A to the Show. Wow. We got one guy in the UK, 2 people in LA. And who are you?
That's a very
I've never seen
existential question. Well, folks, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So far, what I know is my name is Asha Dahya. I am Indian by ethnicity. I was born in the UK, raised in Australia. I live in Los Angeles. I've been living here since 2009. I live with my husband and 2 children, 2 toddlers who wake me up at the butt crack of dawn every day. So as we're recording this podcast, I've been awake for hours and I'm like on coffee. I'm a producer. I'm a writer. I'm the founder of a blog called girltalkhq.com. I make documentaries. I am a board member of the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. I am the host of the rePRO Film Festival podcast series. So I do a whole bunch of like media content creation things, I guess. That's me in a nutshell.
My God, there's a lot of things to process.
Ali,
why did?
Oh, I forgot. I'm also the author of this book called Today's Wonder Women.
Yeah.
Everyday superheroes who are changing the world. There was a book deal that came about from my blog, and it features 50 inspiring, badass women and girls from around the world who are just doing just world-changing things. And they're not celebrities, but you should know their names and know their stories. And the idea is to really inspire everyday people, mostly women and girls, but everyone too, not just women, that, you know, when you read their stories, you think, oh, I can do something really amazing and impactful in my life and in my community too. So yeah, that's the book. It's on Amazon and all good bookstores.
And how did you find these 50 women? Like, how did you connect with them? How did you interact with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with my blog, Girl Talk HQ, some of the interviews started online, and then I kind of adapted them, edited them, and then found new people to interview. And they're people that have kind of been on my orbit, that I've seen them doing really amazing things, that I wanted to interview them. And when this book deal came about, it was like the perfect opportunity to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm writing this. Would you be interested in being profiled? And most of them said yes. Some said no, just for scheduling reasons. But honestly, I've been really lucky with my blog that most of the people come to me and say, hey, can you feature my client? Or can you interview me? I'm doing this project, or I'm writing this book, or I started this company. And I think the people who find Girl Talk HQ know that it's a platform about, sharing stories about everyday women who are doing really cool, inspiring things, who are breaking barriers, who are blazing trails, breaking glass ceilings in different industries and things like that. So I feel like most of the people that I really want to interview have come to me. That's just in the book as well as ongoing online as well. So yeah, I'm just really lucky that these women, found me, and I found some of them, and they said yes when I asked them.
Damn, that must have been
speechless. I like that.
That must have been a very crazy trip, just meeting all these people and interacting with them, hearing their stories. What story do you feel like you resonated with the most? Like maybe on a personal level, let's say.
Yeah. I like that question, and to contextualize a little bit. So when I got the book deal, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. And I think a few weeks later, I found out that I was going to have a girl. So it felt very serendipitous that my first child was a boy, and then I was going to have a girl, and then I got this book deal. And so it felt very serendipitous. And so I'm writing this book from the comfort of my bed and my computer and sending emails, while I'm battling nausea and fatigue. And so it was kind of like a weird juxtaposition of doing this creative thing, but also like creating human life and feeling like blah. But in terms of the people that I resonated with, I think I really connected with the women who were mothers and whose lives and stories were centered on something to do with their motherhood experience, because it really shapes you. I mean, anyone who's a parent will know that, having this little person look up to you is so all consuming, and you're just like, holy crap, I am in control of you, but I'm not. And I'm responsible for creating and shaping your life. And whoa, that's a huge responsibility. And especially for mothers too who have children and give birth to them, it's a very all-consuming physical experience as well. There was one woman who I really admired her. She started an organization called Free Mom Hugs, and she is a white woman from Oklahoma, and she's a white Christian woman. And when she was telling me her story, she was like, I'm typically very conservative, but I had a son who came out as gay, and all of a sudden it really forced me to really challenge my perspectives that I'd heard in the church, that I had been holding on to because of my beliefs. And she learned about data, how, so many LGBTQ youth are abandoned by their families. They don't have this support system. And so she created this organization, which started from a viral Facebook post where she just wanted to go out to pride parades and farmers markets and different events in her community to reach out to LGBTQ youth and just say, hey, if you don't have a parent that's in your life supporting you, I just want to give you a hug and give you free mom hugs. And they now have chapters in all 50 states in the United States. They go to churches and community centers and colleges and really talk about what they do and why it's important for, especially people of faith, to support, their queer children and, share data around, high rates of suicide and homelessness and poverty. And so I just really admire the way that she still calls herself a Christian, and she's really steadfast in her faith, but she allowed herself to be open-minded enough to see the world from her son's perspective. And it's just so beautiful what they've been doing. And I think there have been times when they've stood in at weddings and she's been the mom, and their volunteers have been the parents of queer youth who don't have family in their lives, on their special day. So it was just really amazing to see how her son had shaped her life, and that had become her story. And so that's something really important and really awesome that I got to write about.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's a pretty interesting, story. And, it's what I get from that. It's like, oh, you don't have like the labels you put on, right? Like whether you're Christian or whether you're, not, or you can be outside of those boxes, and it might be best actually for us not to fit in any label, but to actually learn from all different things and look through, all different people's perspectives. So
absolutely, yeah.
So let's segue into a hot topic, abortion, pretty much. Why is everyone so quiet?
Waiting to see what your question is.
You're the one who's like just going out with these questions, like who are you, like abortion, like I don't know what's next at this point, like surprisingly.
Well, let's do it. I think it's a really important topic to talk about.
Well, why? So my question is, it seems to me that with the queer thing, all right, this is going to be controversial, but if something is natural, if it happens, it's natural, right? It's just like it's part of the world, it's not unnatural for someone to be a certain way if that's who they are, And with the topic of abortion, I'm just, you've done a lot of research about this. I'm curious to know, why is it such a sensitive topic?
I love that question. Well, first, my perspective, and a lot of people who I follow and learn from, leaders in reproductive rights movements globally, don't believe it should be sensitive. One, because it's very, very common. And two, because it's sensitive because it's being politicized. That's the number one reason. Every religion, every person of faith has different approaches toward abortion. There's not one, even in like Christianity or Islam or Catholicism or Buddhism, there isn't just one train of thought about how to approach abortion. There's like a general feeling of, it should be this or it should be that. But there is so much nuance, even in one particular faith, that there's no way that any faith leader or any politician could say, this is what we should think about abortion and these are the laws, because the reality is people's lives are complex, complicated, nuanced. Things happen unexpectedly, and to take away the right of someone to decide what is best for their life and their pregnancy in a really, really vulnerable time is just so egregious to me. And I say this as someone who I was pro-choice before I was pregnant, but having 2 children, going through that process of, talking to doctors, hospitals, clinics, and making decisions at every stage. And there's literally a million things that have to happen in your body every week to go right for a pregnancy to come out as well as it should. And so when one little thing goes wrong, all of a sudden, then you have to make these complex and potentially very difficult decisions. And when you come up against laws that say, well, this law says that you should wait 72 hours to decide whether you should have an abortion because we don't think you thought about it enough. And there are very condescending laws like that, especially here in the US. It makes me realize that this shouldn't be a political issue. It can be religious for people individually, if that's the way you want to approach it in your life and your pregnancy. But there's no way one law or one directive can ever fully encompass all the things that could potentially go wrong and that has to happen for a pregnancy to go right. And so for me, abortion shouldn't be a sensitive topic. It should be more normalized. We should be using the word because a lot of really virulently anti-choice people use the word a lot. And because they've sucked up a lot of oxygen in the room, there's more room for misinformation, for lies, for damaging narratives, like, saying things like, you're a murderer if you have an abortion. Well, you don't know what happened to that woman's pregnancy. Something could have gone terribly wrong, and now you're calling her a murderer on top of the trauma that she's potentially already going through. So, the more conversations we have and the more stories that we hear from people who are willing to share, not everyone's willing to share, and that's okay. People get a lot of threats, death threats, and a lot of shaming and judgment for sharing their abortion stories. But people who do share their stories, I think is really going to allow people to hear from different perspectives and potentially bring down our walls of judgment and just, bring some empathy and understanding to the conversation. So that's what I'm trying to do through the documentary films that I'm working on, through the advocacy work that I do, and with the organizations that I'm affiliated with.
Wow, you broke that down, really clearly. It just sounds, I'm just really interested in you, Asha, because, you've come from a religious Christian evangelical background, and you've been part of the church and the conservative church. And, it's not too many people, from what I understand, in those places end up opening their minds to other kinds of perspectives, and I don't know, how did that come about, for you? Because you were hosting, you were doing all this, TV work, and which has nothing to do with, or I don't know, from what I understand, it's very different from, women's advocacy.
Very different. Yeah.
Right.
Well, when I started out hosting my early 20s, straight out of college,
right.
I was doing pop culture, like MTV and entertainment and music. And it was great. I mean, it was a really great training ground for me. I got to work in the industry. I got to be on TV, and I thought I was really cool. I saw you on
Nickelodeon, by the way, when I was.
Oh, you did? No way.
I
love that show. That was fun. Oh man, that was great. We filmed that in Orlando in Florida. When I first moved here, that was like the first job that I got. But it was a lot of fun. I think that was a really great time for me. But then, as I got toward my late 20s, things, I changed a lot. You grow and evolve as a person. And also at that time, I got married for the first time when I was, I just hit my microphone. I got married for the first time when I was 24. And that's very, very common within conservative evangelical circles. If you start dating someone, there's a lot of pressure to get married because no sex before marriage. And so there's a lot of really bad situations where people just end up getting married just because they want to have sex and not feel guilty. And it's really, really sad. And there are a lot of people who get into abusive relationships. I was one of those people. And I think, 4 years on, after getting married, 4 years on, I knew that I had to get out. And so I left the marriage and I left the church. That person that I was married to, my ex-husband, worked at the church. So it felt right to leave that church. And that was here in Los Angeles too, which is considered very, liberal, very forward thinking. But there are pockets in anywhere you go where you just never know what communities are there and people who are hurting. And so it was a very large church, and there were a lot of people in similar situations to me. But thankfully, I had the support of my parents, who are also Christian, back in Australia, who were like, "This is a very toxic environment and relationship. Please, you have our support. Just leave, get out." And so that really gave me the courage to leave.
That's
because
awesome.
A lot of people don't. I know people I've heard of women who are being counseled, that's the word that they use in churches, counseled to stay in abusive relationships because God hates divorce and you should do the right thing. And it's so, so damaging. And I think those experiences really shaped me to become a person. I mean, I'm very strong and stubborn anyway, but that really shaped my advocacy for women a lot. And leaving the church, I really wanted to learn about things like women's rights and the history of the women's suffrage movement and feminism from a perspective that wasn't so like feminism is evil. These women are awful. They're trying to destroy families and babies and rah, rah, rah. And then once I actually started learning from a different perspective, I was like, oh, these are my people. This is something that I can resonate with. You know, we're empowering each other to live our best lives. And it wasn't man-hating at all. A lot of the groups that I was supporting, you know, women in film and women in business and just different feminist networks here in Los Angeles, it really was about supporting each other and finding ways to break barriers where they needed to be broken and share our stories and come together as a community. So that really resonated with me. And I think more so because in the church that I was in, although it was very large and very diverse, the culture was very American white conservative evangelical, which was really a shame because there were so many cultures there. The leadership was very white, very male. And when and people in the church knew that I was going through a separation. No one reached out to me. Not the women's pastor didn't reach out to me, and no one came alongside me to be like, hey, how can we support you? I had a few guys reach out to me, be like, hey, you should stay with your ex because you're doing the wrong thing. I'm like, wow, this is really, it's really sad. Standing afar from it now, many years later, I can say that it's really such a shame when the church becomes the last place that people go to for support and, you know, they end up leaving because they don't get what they need there. And so that's why I'm really big on finding community, finding your tribe, finding your support system, and being open-minded about how we can listen to other people. And so it's the same with with abortion. There are many studies that show, studies done by religious anti-abortion organizations that have found that the church is the last place that women go to when they're struggling with a vulnerable time in their life or their pregnancy, because they know that they're going to get shame and judgment, even though 1 in 3 women before the age of 45 will have an abortion. So everyone knows someone, everyone loves someone who has had an abortion, realistically. And so I really wanted to kind of open my mind to, you know, hearing different women's stories of their struggle and sharing mine too. I think that was really part of it. It's like, well, if I want to share other people's vulnerabilities, I have to be vulnerable as well. And that can be hard. And sometimes I felt embarrassed or ashamed, but, you know, ultimately it's enabled me to grow and connect with people that I'm meant to be connected with and do opportunities like this. So I hesitate to say I'm thankful for everything I went through, because I don't ever want to do it again. And I sometimes wish I didn't, but at the same time, it's gotten me where I am today. So I guess I'm just still learning and growing.
And how would you define your relationship with the church now? Like, is it ended completely, or are you still like, how would you describe it?
I would consider myself a spiritual person. I don't go to a church regularly like I used to, or I did for almost 30 years of my life since I was born up until I left. It was, you know, Sunday morning church service, Friday night youth group service, Wednesday night Bible study. Like that's a thing with the evangelical church. That there's a huge emphasis on commitment and being involved, and, you know, a lot of pressure to do more than just the Sunday service kind of thing. You have to go so regularly. So I don't do any of that anymore. However, I am part of different communities and different support groups. I've connected with a large group online called the Ex-Evangelical Movement. And there's a lot of people like me who have left conservative traditions, and they're really trying to find themselves and deconstruct. I think deconstructing their faith, you know, deconstructing anything that has been toxic or abusive or harmful can take years and years. And so there's still a lot of me that is still learning to undo certain ways of thinking about topics, about people, about relationships. But I think I still believe in God or a higher power. I just don't believe a lot of the very detailed day-to-day things that I was pressured to believe, like God is in control of everything, but also you have free will. So now I'm like, which one is it? And we're never really taught to question those things. It's just like, this is what you're taught and this is the theology. And so for me, it really is about questioning things and knowing that if God is real and God is all powerful, and whether God is he, she, or has no gender, then God is not going to be angry at my questions and who I am and where I am. I think I find myself as more of a spiritual wanderer and questioner, and I'm okay with that now. Whereas before it was very much about, like you were talking about labels, Paul, you have to fit into a label, you have to fit into a box, you have to be defined in every way so people know how to put you in a certain position. Whereas I'm like, I'm still learning, I'm still reading things that are interesting. I know what I don't want to be involved in, but hey, I'm open.
It's interesting that when you mentioned how they say like God is in control, but you have free will, and this is also mentioned in Islam as well. And I've had this discussion before with people in my life, and recently it dawned on me. Like I was watching this series called Dirk Gently. Dirk Gently, a holistic detective agency. It's a weird series, but it's pretty interesting, to be honest.
Okay.
Like the themes behind it are very, like, once you watch it, it's like, okay, what's going on? But then you pick up on it. But there's this one point that's mentioned, is that fate and chance are not mutually exclusive, with and free will is included into it. For me, when I heard that, I connected it with the discussions I've had about religion, where they say, there's destiny, but at the same time you have free will, like everything is written, but like you also have a choice. And because we always deal with obsoletes, that's the thing. Well, obviously with labels is one part of it, it's one category, but we're always dealing with obsoletes so that it can be easier for us to understand. We just we want to say like it's either binaries, like either this or that, or it's not. People don't like to see like whenever we tell people like something's on a spectrum or something is just like, it's not just that, it's much more. It's connected to multiple factors. I feel like it just confuses people, and like they don't understand what's going on.
As well, to someone
exactly
say like, oh, it could be any number of things, and all of a sudden their whole view is threatened.
Yeah, because people are just used to, at this point, they're like, someone has to tell them like, this is the answer, that's it, go, like that's enough, and people will be okay with that, while others will be like, well, like a smaller portion of the population will start to look at it and be like, I think there's more than just that. There's a bigger answer to just a simple conclusion brought about by one person.
Yeah, maybe there's, there are people who are more curious and want to go on that journey and not feel like they have to define everything. And others are happier just being in, a place where they're told what to do and that's easy for them. And that's fine too, as long as it's not abusive or harmful in any way and they're not hurting other people. I think it's just a matter of allowing people to live the lives that they want to live in freedom and safety and giving them the choice. And yeah, it is interesting to hear different perspectives. And, it used to feel threatening for me, like, what if I don't have all the answers? And, if I don't have the answers, how am I going to live? But now it's like, well, I'm here, I'm living. So you deal with it.
You deal with it. Yeah. Just to comment on what you were saying, and it's, I love the journey you went through. I'm sorry, about the abuse that happened before, but
thank you.
Everything happens for a reason. And, your growth and your curiosity and, I think that's what makes us human, the ability to think, the ability to be curious, the ability to handle all these nuanced concepts, right? That's what separates us from animals, right? That we're able to do that and have these conversations about all these topics. So I'm curious to hear from you, Asha. Have you had any backlash? Now that you're talking about all these topics, I'm sure there are haters, and as you said, there are there are people that are very sensitive and send death threats and things like that. So
Yeah, I have had some backlash, not to the point of death threats, thankfully. You know, when I've talked about abortion, and there have been a couple of times where I've been interviewed on Fox News I've only done it like once or twice, where they want a panel of people, and I don't do those anymore because honestly, those are just for ratings and it's very clickbaity. But they wanted someone who was pro-choice, and I went on and I shared my view. One was with the Laura Ingraham show. I can't believe I went on that show. But what I did, you know, is she was talking about a law in New York that passed a couple of years ago called the Reproductive Health Act, which basically said that if the federal law for legal abortion falls, which it looks like it will this June, Roe versus Wade, then abortion is going to go to each of the states. So each of the states are now passing their own safeguard laws. They're called trigger laws. So it's either going to immediately put women in jail, or it's going to protect them and their choices and, you know, give them the care that they need. And New York was one of the states that passed a law that essentially, down to brass tacks, it took abortion out of the penal code from a 1970s law and put it into the health and education code. So it just moved it so that it wouldn't be a punitive issue. It would be something to do with health and safety and, you know. And so but the way that, you know, Fox News talk about these things, they make it very controversial. And, oh my God, people are going to have abortions on demand up until the 9th month. And so I went on there and I didn't really answer or respond to what they were saying. I basically just said, this is what the law does. And I think I didn't give them what they wanted, so they didn't invite me back. But I hope that I at least, you know, people watching heard what I said and was like, oh, is that all it is? I thought it's, you know, like abortions on demand. And I didn't respond to any of that. I literally just said what the law does and that if we want to protect women and babies, we don't do that by putting them in jail. And so I could tell, and a friend of mine watching was like, oh yeah, I don't think Laura Ingraham liked that you didn't take the bait. So I'm like, great, I'm not there for her. I'm going to, you know, provide information. And so I did get a couple of people like, oh, you're a baby murderer and you're this and you're that. And I was like, all right. But beyond that, nothing really. You know, some backlash from people in my church who I used to be friends with, you know, very close friends with, and then who shunned me when I decided to get a divorce. And I was like, whoa, that already is a huge red flag. You know, you were one of my best friends, and because I decided to leave an abusive situation, I'm not following the rules anymore, and I'm not your friend. And, you know, these few people would write to me about things that I was sharing about reproductive rights and all that stuff. And it used to bug me, but now I'm at the stage where I'm not trying to convert people's thinking. I'm trying to challenge them. I'm here to present facts as I discover them, as you know, needs to be shared. And I'm really speaking to more pro-choice people, because there's a lot of pro-choice people who are on the fence, or they're not willing to speak up enough. And honestly, we're the majority, and we do need to be more bold in speaking up and pushing back. So that's who my audience is now. And alongside that, I don't really get into debates about abortion, because what are you debating? An opinion. And I don't have time for that. You know, I don't anyway. Maybe other people do. And, you know, the people like the Ben Shapiro's of this world, you know, the Jordans, people like that. You know, I'm not hating on them, but their whole is debating and creating a brand on being antagonistic. That's not my thing. You know, for me, advocacy for abortion is about helping the people who need it the most and supporting the organizations who are on the front lines and sharing the information that is hopefully going to challenge people, whether that's through film, whether that's through interviews, through podcasts like this, or writing. You know, that's where I'm at. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So because I'm in that kind of space now, I don't get as much backlash. Whereas if I was, you know, doing the panel debates, it would be, but that's not my brand. And honestly, like, you don't gain anything out of it other than followers. And that's not what I want. What I want is to see laws that safeguard people's choices and freedoms to do what they know is right for their lives. And so, yeah, it's so the worst. and there was one woman who wrote to me after I went on Fox, and she was like, she saw my TEDx talk, and she was just like, I can't believe you're into murdering babies. Let's just say the most ridiculous things. And why are you even pro-choice? And I'm just like, well, actually, I'm not just pro-choice, because I think even the pro-choice, pro-life is too binary. I believe in reproductive justice, which is more than just about abortion and birth control. It's about how to raise the rights to raise your family in safety and with support. And it's not just about abortion. It's about infertility. It's about miscarriage. It's about, all these different motherhood, fatherhood, paternity leave, all these different things that are intertwined with the issue of reproductive rights. So that confused her as well. She's like, what do you mean you're not pro-choice or pro-life? What else is there? I'm like, exactly. So that was probably like the most interesting interaction I had from someone who was giving me backlash. So yeah.
So it's interesting that you tie all those other things, all those other topics to the topic of abortion too, the maternity leave and paternity leave and having a safe family and all that jazz. And if you don't mind, Asha, I'm going to give you a little pushback here.
I'm ready for it.
No, it's just that, well, you have kids. I would, I'm a little young man, but maybe one day I would like to have kids. I think they're pretty cool. And, an abortion is something you do if you don't want kids, right? I'm sure for you, the first thing you tell the police about were your kids, and I'm sure you really love your kids. So if you're someone who you love your kids so much and you love kids, why would you, why are you in advocacy of, abortion?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right.
And I don't think that's pushback at all. I think this is an important question. A lot of pro-choice people have children and they want to have children. And I think it really reiterates that it's not about either or. It's about the full spectrum. Like life is a spectrum. So many things happen to us. And, maybe one day we're down the road when you have kids, you'll be in a situation where you'll understand that, these are very private decisions that you want to make with your partner and, making for your family. And they're really important decisions to make as well. And so the whole idea of abortion isn't by itself in its own little silo over here. It fits into the whole spectrum of how we think about reproductive justice, which was a framework coined by Black women leaders in the early 90s because they felt that the pro-choice movement in America was not catering to the intersectionality of race, of class, of financial status, of all those other things that make, that come into reproductive issues. And so they came up with this idea that reproductive justice is you should have that freedom of choice. People want to have families, they want to have children, but they also want to have the right not to have that and be able to do that in safety and not be shamed for choosing not to have children or to be on birth control or to not get married. And, a lot of gender is there's a lot of that tied into it. There's a lot of pressure on women to be a certain way, like have children, but don't have too many children. Or if you be ambitious, but not too ambitious. Don't be a CEO, but also don't have a low-paying job and don't go on welfare. You cheat, there's so many contradictions that happen.
Yes.
That's why you can't just think of abortion in its own little thing. It is indelibly connected to your financial status, your physical health status, who's your support community, who's your political representative in community, and what laws are they passing. Do you have access to clean drinking water? And there are many places in America and around the world where, people don't have that. Imagine someone living in a refugee camp who's pregnant, who doesn't have access to a doctor 24/7 whenever they want. That's a really difficult situation. And so there's so many things that factor into reproductive justice and reproductive rights that it can't just be about one issue. It has to be about the full spectrum of life. And that I'm in development on a documentary series with a British production company. And right now the working title is Life at All Costs. And the underlying thesis really is, whose life do we value and at what cost? What cost are we willing to pay to make sure someone is able to live? Does it depend on their skin color? Does it depend on their bank account, on their postcode or zip code? Or, are we only giving certain people the amount of rights or does it depend on your religious faith, depending on which country you're in? So we're really trying to look at how global abortion laws and reproductive rights impact everyday women. In El Salvador, women are being putting in jail for up to 30 years for having stillbirths and miscarriages because you can't tell the difference between a stillbirth and a miscarriage and an abortion at certain early stages of the pregnancy. So doctors are turning these women into the authorities so that they don't get in trouble. So there are women in jail that some have been there for 13, 17 years, and there are lawyers in America working and with Amnesty and International working to get them out of jail. And there are women in Poland who right now and Ukraine who are trying to get to the UK to get safe and legal abortions, because in their country, the countries in Eastern Europe are passing these really, really draconian laws. But there are these women in these perilous medical situations. Recently, a woman died because she wasn't able to get out of her country and get the care that she needed. So these are the things that are happening. And so for me as a mother, it makes sense for me to be like, well, I want people to have, I recognize my privilege, and I'm so blessed to be in Southern California where I had great access to healthcare. I want everyone to be able to have that and make that decision. I was able to make the decision with my husband, like, hey, are we ready to have kids? Let's look at our finances. Yeah, we're ready. Let's try having kids. Like, everyone should be able to have, make that decision when the time is right for them. And if not, even if they're in a situation where, okay, this was unexpected, but we still want to be supported and make the right decisions and know that we're not going to be shamed or judged or thrown into jail or potentially die because of the situation that we're in. So for me, being a mother really is like the cherry on the top or the capstone to why I'm pro-choice. Like, it makes more sense to me now than previously, I guess. That was a very long-winded answer. I know.
But you went pretty deep, I'll say, on, I didn't know about the stuff in El Salvador or in Poland. It makes sense that, there are communities that are way more pro-life, but then they kill people and they'll put them in jail.
They advocate for and they advocate for cutting school lunches and Medicaid and healthcare. And it's like if you're only looking at abortion and forgetting all the other things, and you're ignoring women who are put in immigration detention centers, who are pregnant women who are miscarrying because they're not being given medical attention, how pro-life are you? It's like, these are challenging questions that we need to think about, not just for anti-abortion people, but all people. Like, if we say that we want to protect life and value it, well, we've got to look at it all. And I know that not everyone can advocate for every issue, but it's just about thinking wider and understanding not everything happens in a vacuum or in a binary. There are so many other factors linked to this that we need to be curious and open-minded about and be willing to hear about as well.
Oh, wow. Is it, I want to know from, so now you're, doing all this advocacy work. It seems like you've learned a lot, and, you're sharing the knowledge of all you've learned. Do you feel like, I don't know, what's your, what are you most passionate about? Is it this topic? Is it the producing work you do, the hosting work you do? You're involved in, this is just one of the things that you're involved in the blog and, book you wrote and all that jazz. So what is for you the thing that that you're most passionate about, I guess, today?
Yeah. I think the thing that I'm most passionate about is being a storyteller. That covers a range of different topics. I'm very passionate about women's advocacy, women's rights, reproductive rights, and that advocacy right now. And I think I will for a long time. But ultimately, storytelling and sharing people's stories. One of my favorite things to do is binge watch TV, and I do watch documentaries, but I watch a lot of narrative shows, and I'm just really intrigued by story. How do you write a character? How does a story come together? Why do people get hooked into a show? And it's not just narrative shows, but how do you do that with a documentary? How do you do that with a podcast? How do you do that with a written piece? And I think storytelling really has the power to change the world. Film and documentaries have the power to change the world. One of the recent award-winning documentaries, Flea. I don't know if any of you have seen that documentary.
I did see Flea. What a great film. Yeah.
Great film. And, just the power of that animation and the story, real life story of someone who's a refugee, who's escaping a conflict situation, and just the ability for that film and that singular story to break through all that political noise that's out there on the TV and on the internet, and to just sit and come face to face with someone's story you don't get to debate it. Why you know, there's no debating, there's no being pushing back on it. It's just being immersed and seeing the nuance and the complexity of someone who's a refugee, who's fleeing their home country for safety, and understanding that ultimately they're a human being and they want to live in safety, and they want to be loved, and they want to know that their life is worthy. And I think those are universal things. And so through storytelling, I think I can, through my work, hopefully share those values. You know, one of the things I like to tell myself often is I want to feel like I am worthy, that I'm loved, and that my life matters. And I think those are universal things. We all want to be connected to people and feel like we are loved, and that we are worth being on this planet. And so when we take any of those out of the equation, that's when we start to see bad things happen, I think. So for me, it all comes down to storytelling. How do I tell the story of this issue or this woman or, you know, this instance that happened?
I have a question that's a bit like, I don't know, it's going to be a bit weird maybe, or something like that. But like what kind of advice would you give to women where to efficiently value themselves in their lives?
Oh, that's a loaded question too. That's not weird at all. I think that's a really great question, but very, very heavy, because I don't know if I have all the advice. I think for women to value themselves, and for anyone really, but specifically because that's the audience that I like to speak to, is really look within. I think a lot of us are taught to find our value being attached to a certain person, or, you know, specifically attached to a man in a marriage or a job, or to look a certain way. But honestly, our worth comes from within. For some people, that's religion. For some people, that's writing. For some people, that's connecting with nature and feeling fulfilled, you know, but it all has to start from within, because once we know who we are within, and once I started going on that journey, you know, stripping away the harmful religious beliefs that I've been brought up in and getting out of an abusive marriage, once I started figuring out who am I and what do I want, and what kind of things do I want to share with the world, and how do I want to show up in the world every day and be my best self. Once I figured out who I was less competitive. I felt less self-doubt. I was channeling my ambitions in the right way instead of trying to do all these things and be everything to everyone and feeling like I had to do that over here and that over there. It's like I knew my path, I knew my lane. And really tapping into my intuition, which was another thing that was kind of forbidden in my religion, you know, knowing thyself rather than putting all my energy and focus on God or Jesus in this case. So I think that really empowered me. And while, you know, being interested in other things is not wrong at all, I think the worth and the knowing really has to come from within first. So yeah, that's the best advice that I could give. And also surround yourself with supportive people. I mean, there's a saying that you are the sum of the closest 5 people around you. So who are the people that you relate to the most? Are they toxic? Are they harmful? Are they beautiful? Are they enriching your life? You know, those are the people you want to be around, and because that's how you shape yourself. It's like raising a child. My husband and I are the closest things to my 2 children. So they're being shaped by us. And so that can be a bad thing, or it could be a good thing in certain situations. So it's really about who you surround yourself with and who you know who you are inside as well.
You know, you said something important is like finding out who you are as a person. And we asked you in the beginning, like, who are you? Ali did that. Yeah. But I think now, after the whole episode and the discussions we've had, I feel like you have a different answer if we ask you that question again.
Yeah, maybe. I love that. Come full circle at the
end. Towards that. So I think the final question from me would be, who are you, Asha?
I knew you were going to ask that. Yeah, you know, it is interesting how I rattled off all these things that I've done and who I am and, you know, what's on my resume. But who I am is I'm a complex, flawed, very complicated person at times. I'm someone who loves to laugh. I'm someone who loves a good story. I love good food. I love being organized. And I love meeting the energy of meeting new people, but I also like being by myself and reading a book. So yeah, I guess that's a very different description of who I am based on who I said at the beginning. And I like that you asked that.
Wow, we really went full circle. This is a pretty deep podcast, I'll say.
I know.
we try our best. I mean, that's what we're here for.
All right.
Well, I'm very thankful. I think this was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, and I know we're running out of time here, so I have one more question I want to ask you. This one's a little so I want to know how do you reach out to people, right? Because we're podcasters and you interview a lot of people. You've interviewed a lot of people, many cool people, and so how do you connect with all these people you meet and ask them to get to talk to you and meet with you? It's a little selfish question.
It's definitely changed a lot because of COVID, obviously. I mean, but it's increased the amount of time I spend online, whether it's people on Instagram or Twitter. I use the most just for following people and reading articles and things like that. But I find a lot of interesting people from people that I follow as well. Just reading articles through the network of people that I'm friends with. I get recommendations for different organizations or different films or different shows that I should watch. I really rely on, the people that I follow and people that I'm friends with for good recommendations. I love to read. I'm a huge reader, as you can tell by this bookshelf behind me. Actually, it's a very small bookshelf, to be honest. That's not the most badass bookshelf. But when I have the time, I love to read, and for me, that's a way to get to know people and to learn about different issues and topics. But I think my research is kind of like it's all over the place, but a lot of it is done online and through reading articles and books.
All right, perfect. Well, what a great podcast we had today. And let's sign out this podcast. All right, thank you very much for coming on the show, Asha. What a great podcast. It's good to pleasure to meet you. You're on A Squared, the show, the most international variety podcast. Saeed, good to see you again. This is how we sign out. Salute to the camera and adios, amigos.